Okay. I can't see with my glasses on. There we go. I want to tell you a love story. A story about a girl who met the sandy-haired boy on a train to camp, and about their families. Because no love story can exist in a vacuum, and unions almost always involve more than two people, some for better, some for worse. I met Mama and Daddy when I was barely 16, and Ira was almost 16, and fell in love with his humor and their sweetness, with how Dad and Ira interacted, kibitzed, as he called it, bantered, checked each other. I fell in love with the respect he showed us, even as the kids, and mostly how much he completely and unquestionably loved his wife, his partner, his friend. They were like peas and carrots, to quote a movie. Ira and I loved spending time with them. And 3 years after we met, they and my parents had a little meeting behind our backs, so to speak, to talk about the kids. My dad thought we were too young, but Dad, Ed, Saba, whatever you want to call him, had a different perspective. He said that he and Liz believed in young love, that sometimes, if you're lucky, you just get it right the first time out. They all agreed, they all became our safety net. They became friends, and we became a family. And like I said, the beauty of it all is that we really enjoyed being with them. We really enjoyed spending New Year's Eve with them. And we went to movies. In fact, one movie in particular stands out. Dad picked it, I think. And we went into Westwood to see Harold and Maude. And we sat through this movie. And it was kind of strange. Nobody was actually there. It was kind of an empty theater. And as we walked out, he looked at us and said, well, that was different. We went to San Francisco on a trip. We came with 2 dogs in tow. One of them was a puppy. And they didn't bat an eye. When I think about it, we traveled with these 2 mutts who were a little destructive. What else is new in our life? And we went to San Francisco, and we stayed in the same room. And we walked on the beach, and we snuck the dogs in and out of the motels. And we had a most fabulous time. So there was always that, yeah, we were the kids, but I loved how they respected us. And I think in our time with them, we looked at them and thought, okay, this is the way where we want to go. And I think they looked at us and said, a little bit of this is where we used to be. And it worked. It worked because my parents and his parents worked together. And our families blurred, the edges blurred. And we really thought that that's the way it always was. And that's the way we were lucky. I guess we were really, really lucky. And after Mama died, we really worried about Dad. We really worried that what was going to happen to him. And he cried a lot. But he used to drive over to our house. Well, he'd stop at the Big Chill first, and then he'd come over to our house. And he'd sit at the kitchen table, and we'd talk. And he'd look at us and say, just tell me when you're done with me and I'll go home. And we'll say, well, are you ready to go home? And he'd say, no, I'm not ready. I'd say, okay, fine, then stay. And Ira would go and do some work, and then I would go and do some work, and he would stay and he would play with Willow, because we always had a dog for him, for us. And we talked, and I loved hearing his stories. The stories about his childhood, the stories about meeting his Liz, the stories about the family and how he felt about everything and how he felt about everybody. He wasn't afraid to say, I love you. He wasn't afraid to have an opinion. But he always did it in such a way that you also got to have your opinion. It was wonderful. My mom did Dad's taxes, and then he took her to lunch. And they worked together, and it was a good family. Anyway, it's getting too long. The one thing that will always stick with me is Dad sitting at our kitchen table, having some black coffee, having finished his yogurt from the Big Chill. And he'd look at me, and he looked at Ira, and he said, I thought it would last forever. It never occurred to me that it wouldn't last forever. And I just thought about it. And I look around this room, and I see all these kids, and the grandkids, and the great-grandkids, and I think, it does last forever.